Welcome to Real, Raw, and Open Talks with me, Melissa. So, I have completely rebranded my podcast and I've been sitting with a new name for almost a year. This video is going to be the third part to the beginning of my podcast, the first two episodes, which were recorded almost a year ago. So, I've been sitting with a new name for almost a year. And I thought it just suited me much better. Since then, I've been through a huge death and rebirth, like I'm sure most of us have. And I think this new name embodies more of what I want this podcast to be. It's called the Real, Raw, and Open Podcast. And I want to create a space for us to come together and share things real, raw, open, vulnerably, and authentically because I know that the world needs more of that. And it's just so important for people to begin sharing in this way. It's like a permission slip for others that they can show up as themselves. They could be vulnerable, they could be authentic, and they don't have to show up any other way than how they are. And so that's why I'm showing up to this podcast. Actually, it's my first video podcast, so I'm excited about that um, because I want to start recording my podcasts as videos so I can share them to different platforms. And I think it's just much more interactive when you could watch a video. I love watching video podcasts. So I'm showing up. My hair's a mess. Don't ask what this bun is. My shirt is wrinkled. I'm in Bali right now. I hope that you could hear me clearly with this little microphone. Um, and yeah, let's get started. I'm excited to finally, literally a year later, because, life happened and I was like down bad for over 6 months, going through a lot of depression and everything like that. And I lost my dad since the last time I recorded my two-part series podcast. So, I put life on pause and I'm here now almost a year later finishing this episode or it's the third part to the last two episodes and hopefully the final part if I could keep it under an hour. So in my last episode, I talked about I shared my story and my story with finding my purpose and how I was guided to Egypt. And from what I remember, the last part that I left off on was when I arrived to the airport in Egypt. So it's funny because I actually recorded probably like 30 minutes of that episode and never got to finish it. And I listened to it a few weeks ago and I was like, I can't, I don't think I can post the part that I recorded because it felt like I was like complaining almost. So I had a difficult time in Egypt. So many initiations, of course. And that's really what I want to share in this episode is all of the initiations I went through. But when I was listening to the podcast, I was like, it kind of sounds like I'm just like complaining and venting, and I'm not sure how I felt about that. But after like realizing that when I share things that are on my heart, like I want to just be able to share freely. And like if that was my experience, I want to be able to share that. And yeah, I'm not complaining. I'm not doing any of that. And I think venting on a podcast is actually it's like therapy for me. So I would love to do that. And whoever wants to tune in and listen to my stories, like I think they'll feel called to it. And if not, they don't have to listen to it. So I think it's okay to share my story in the way that I did. But I think it's better to just um, start fresh instead of going off of the 30 minutes that I already recorded. I want to start fresh and do this as a video podcast. And yeah, I'm excited to share about my experience in Egypt because a lot of people have been asking me. It's been about 2 years now since I was even in Egypt and was guided to move there. And people ask me, like, how was your experience? And what was it like and I would say like, "Oh, I'm gonna record a podcast episode on it, so I'll share it with you when I do." And just life happened, and now here we are, uh, a year later from the first time I started to tell my story, and I finally get to share the story. So I'm excited. It was crazy. When I got the call to go to Egypt, it was like in perfect alignment with when my lease was ending in Oahu. And so I was guided to go there without knowing how long I was going to be there for. And like a part of me thought and knew that I was moving there, but I was like, oh no, that sounds crazy because I had never been out of the country before and I didn't even have a passport. So I was like, I don't think I'm probably just going there to travel like a month or two. But at the same time, I was also preparing to be there for however long I felt called to. So when my lease was ending, I was also ending the 13-year relationship I was in. And it was like a toxic relationship. And I was really at that point, that was the ending. It took a few years for me to get to the point where I was like 100% done, never going back. But at that moment, when the lease was ending and I was going off to Egypt, I was like, this is it. This is like a new chapter. I don't know what lies ahead. It was so scary. It was so scary at that time, that in between time of when I was leaving my old life behind and a huge, huge chapter of my life, 13 years with my daughter's father, and like leaving that situation for good, and then leaving that stability because we lived with him and he took care of the rent and everything. So it was like leaving stability behind, financial stability, just like stability for me, feeling safe, having a home, knowing like that the rent was going to be paid and everything like that. And then venturing out, going alone to a country I've never been before. And at that, like Egypt, that's a very intense country to travel to for your first time traveling out of the country, especially as an American, because there's just so many things that are different. It's a complete culture shock. And I was traveling alone with my daughter, completely alone. And I knew one soul sister out there who lived out there and had been living out there for a year. And I started to connect with her, telling her that I felt called to go out there. And she was like, oh, this same thing happened to me. She was like, you're moving here. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I kind of feel that, but I don't know. She's like, no. After I told my story to her, she's like, you're moving here. So she was such a blessing for me because I don't know, I wouldn't have made it. I don't think I would have made it through 5 months living there without her and her fiance. And they were so helpful. Her fiance is Egyptian. And so they helped me with so much while I was out there. But essentially, I was still alone out there. And yeah, I'm so excited to share this story. It's probably going to be a long episode because there's just so many different things and pieces to the story that I feel called to share. But yeah, so because I didn't know if I was moving there or not, but like part of me felt it, I packed everything that I all of my belongings that I cared about, like packed basically everything I owned, everything my daughter owned, and left everything behind that I was okay with losing if we didn't come back. Like, not like it would be forever that we would stay there, but if it's like a year or two, I had no clue what it was going to be. So I had a car in Oahu. Like I said in the last episode, I parked it at the airport and I had so many books, like, and just other things, like a lot of my daughter's toys, and I packed everything in the car that I just was okay with losing. And then everything that was important to me to take, I packed in 4 suitcases and, you know, prepared for my pilgrimage to Egypt. I had 2 huge suitcases, 2 checked luggages, and 2 carry-ons. And I was not thinking much of like how difficult it would be to travel with all that luggage, um, with a kid and backpacks and her stuffed animal, and just it was such a comedic, is that how you say it, comedic scene of us arriving to Egypt with like 2 backpacks, 2 tote bags on my arm, 4 luggages. My daughter pushing one with her stuffed animal. Everything's falling, like things falling off my shoulder. It was like, I don't know what I was thinking, but at the same time, I was like, this is everything that I own, and that means a lot to me that I want to take with me. So I had like no choice. But yeah, I wanted to share that because it made it really difficult, and it's going to be part of the story. Also, another mistake that I made before arriving to Egypt was I got like overly excited about taking pictures like at these gorgeous like guest houses, Airbnbs. So what I did, and I highly recommend you don't do this unless my situation was a bit different because I was moving there without knowing. I was alone with my child and I had all of this luggage that made it really difficult to jump from one hotel to another. So, my first mistake was booking like literally, I think it was three or four, it was four different guest house slash hotels. And the guest houses in Egypt are like, they're really cheap. It's like a hotel. I don't know how to explain it, but they're really cheap, like $30 USD a night. And yeah, that was my budget. Um, so I booked all these different rooms with like these views of the pyramids because I was staying in Cairo. I planned to stay in Cairo for my first month. And so I had everything mapped out with the different guest houses I was going to stay at. And I was like, okay, I'll stay here for 3 days, then I'll go there for 2 days. I'm going to get this room with this incredible view of the Sphinx for one night and then go to the next. Let me tell you, when I got there and had to drag, and a lot of these places didn't have elevators. So I was like having to ask for help taking four suitcases up flights of stairs, and it was like it was a nightmare. I'm trying to think of how to tell this story like cohesively without jumping around. I don't know if it makes it difficult to hear the story if I'm all over the place. But I want to get back to when I arrived to Egypt, and it was Ramadan and it was a huge holiday and I didn't know, I wasn't aware. So when we got to the airport, it was like 1 in the morning and it was so busy. And I think I left off telling this part of the story. So I'll just like fast forward through this, but it was so busy. We couldn't find, just in case I didn't actually, I'm going to just tell the story because I think it might have been the clip that I recorded and never even posted that where I tell the story. So me and my daughter arrived after 20 hours of flying. It was like a 16-hour flight to Dubai, layover, and then like 3 or 4 hours, I think 4.5 hours or something like that from Dubai to Egypt. So it was a long trip. And that was my first international flight and my daughter's as well. And it was intense. And so when we got to Egypt, it was like 1 in the morning. The airport was so crowded. I was very jet lagged and disoriented and absolutely exhausted. Um, and I was just like waiting. I had arranged for a driver. My friend helped me arrange for her driver to pick us up at the airport. And I wasn't aware when I got out there that I would need an Egyptian SIM card. Or an Egypt SIM card. I don't know what the correct word for it is, but you need like a SIM card out there. Specifically for my phone plan, I didn't know because I guess my phone wasn't paid off. They lock the phone. So I couldn't get a SIM card. So I stood in line. My daughter had it. Like she had it. She was so exhausted. She was like crying and it was so difficult. To just take that journey. But I was like, I'm in Egypt, so I got to do what I got to do, and I got to follow the call. And I just like persevered through it. It was so difficult for me, and it was scary. It was so scary to take that leap of faith without knowing, having any clue what it was going to be like or anything. And just yeah, I'm just so thankful I had my friend Bethany to help me when I went through like a lot of difficulties out there. Um, so yeah, I stood in line. My daughter was crying, about to fall to the floor. She was so tired. She was like leaning up against the suitcase and so exhausted. And we wait for like 30 more minutes. We already made it like to the outside of the airport where right before you leave the doors there's the SIM card place. So I'm like, okay, let me get my SIM card. And then um we stood in line for like 30 minutes. When we finally got up there, the guy's like, your phone's locked. You can't have a SIM card. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. Like, I was like, wow, this is quite a start to my arrival in Egypt. So then I was like, okay, it's okay. Let me try to message the driver on WhatsApp. And I couldn't message the driver. My phone wasn't working, my Wi Fi wasn't working, and I was like in complete panic mode. And I was like, what the hell am I gonna do? Like, so I just like was so disoriented, and we just like went outside the airport, and I was like in shock. Like there were so many people lined up. Like I've never seen that many people lined up. And then there was like a gate, and then all these people holding signs, the drivers, right? But because it was Ramadan, it was like it felt like hundreds of people lined up, and I couldn't see. My eyes are bad. Like they just started getting bad to where when I try to see from far away, things are blurry. So I was like trying to look at the signs, and I'm like, I can't read those signs. And there were people lined up like just so close together, just holding signs and like for so long. And I'm looking down like all the way to the end, and I'm like, there's no way in hell that I'm gonna find my name on a sign, because the driver said that he'd be holding a sign with my name. So I was like, okay, I like was walking around looking so lost, so confused, and I was kind of scared because I'm like, I'm in a foreign country by myself with my child, and I'm like, it's not very common to see like a lot of women traveling alone with their kids. So I was like, am I like safe? I don't want to look lost, like but I did. And I was just walking back and forth with four freaking suitcases, a child, a tote bag, her backpack because she couldn't put on a backpack, my backpack, her stuffed animal. Like it was a chaotic mess. And after standing there for like 15 minutes, my daughter's like, also as a mother, 20 hours on a plane with my daughter, who was like, I think she was like 7 at the time, and complaining like a lot of the way. Like I had it up to here. I was so irritable, and I was like so just like I was like I don't even know how to describe it, but like my patience was like shot. And I remember my daughter saying like, I think I see your name over there. And I was like, there's no way your eyes can see that far, because she pointed like I couldn't even see the signs close by. She was pointing like all the way down at the end of the line. And I was like, okay, just can you just hold on a second? Like I was like, irritated mom, just trying to brush off what she was saying so that I could focus and find the driver. But like this is like also a sign. It's like always listen to your children. They're so intuitive. And like my daughter, I'm pretty sure the veil is like so much thinner with children, with their intuition. Like I don't know if one of her guides was like showing her the sign, because it was like magic. When I say she saw a sign that was like so far away, it wasn't humanly possible for her eyes to see that far. So I was like, yeah, there's no way you could see it. And I just kind of like brushed it off, and she said it again. She's like, no, that's your name. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I just like take our suitcases, we walk all the way down to the end of the line, and it's the driver. And I was like, how? Like how? I mean, my intuition was it with it was that she was like guided to to look and see. And yeah, so we found the driver, and we headed to our first guest house, which was a place a soul sister recommended, because it was like a soul family guy who owned it. And but she didn't tell me like what it was going to be like there. It was just a guest house. And yeah, so like I just booked it because I was like, oh yeah, like I want to be by Soul Family. Like she told me that's where she stayed. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna feel safe there. I wanted to go somewhere where I feel like safe, not knowing anyone, being alone. Um, so this is the part I was hesitant to tell in the last episode. So I just want to like clarify, I am in no way like um I don't know, like, I guess there's no way to not come off sounding like a spoiled American. And also, like, never being out of the country before, like, it was really confusing to me because I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what Egypt was like. But this part of Egypt wasn't what all of Egypt is like. It was like this other part that was like not so nice at all, and I'd never seen anything like it. I was so confused. So the after like an hour and a half drive from the airport, we arrived to this place, and it was Ramadan, and I didn't know um, that everyone stays up late, including children, till like 3 in the morning or like longer than that, and they fast, so they don't eat, and everyone's awake. And so when I arrived, there was like kids, um, like 5 years old, sweeping the dirt off of the stairs, and I was like, that's so interesting that the kids are awake, they're working, like they're cleaning. Um, and we waved at them, and we waited for the guy to come meet us outside so he could help us with our bags to go up. And so, like, the elevator had no door on the inside. So, like, you could see the wall going up, and it was stained, and it looked a like it was like the slums almost. And I don't know if that's the right word to describe it, but I was confused because I was like, I didn't know Egypt was like this. And I don't think it is. It's just certain parts. And this just happened to be maybe not the best part of it that this building was in. The building was so run down. And like, for me to arrive in a new country and to arrive to something like that was a bit like difficult for me. And it only got worse from there. And yeah, it was just confusing for me because I was like, what did I what did I book? I thought it'd be like a pretty decent, safe place, and not that it wasn't safe. Like, it was so safe. It's just like a shock. It was such a culture shock because you would look, there was like a basement, like bedroom, and there was no door. So you look inside and you see this mattress on the floor with a family of like 8 children and mother and father staying all in this tiny room with a mattress on the floor. And I was just like, wow, like I did not know, like, maybe it sounds dumb to say I didn't know that this is what Egypt looked like. And it was just shocking to kind of arrive to that scenery. Um, but this is not what all of Egypt is like. But I just wanted to share my story of like how difficult it was to kind of arrive into a place where I was like not feeling like, not knowing. I'm like, am I safe here? What is this? I didn't know what the rest of Egypt was going to look like. This was just my first impression of Egypt. And at the time I was like, is this what all of Egypt looks like? Is this what all the buildings are going to look like? Like, I was just confused. So anyways, the elevator is like literally, this is the size. That might be a little generous with size. The elevator was this long in the same, like a square, right? There was maybe two people could fit next to each other, squished like sardines. And so the guy had to take one suitcase up at a time, and I was so confused. I'm like, oh my god, this is like the craziest thing with the elevator. And then you could see there was no door. So like, once you got in the elevator, you're just looking at like these stained walls, like drinks thrown all over them. And I was just like, okay, let this elevator take me up, and I don't know what to expect when we get up there. Then we get up there, and um, everyone's awake. So first of all, the first shock was this wasn't even a guest house hotel. This was a literal apartment that somebody had turned into a guest house. So the situation was there were 2 or 3 bedrooms and a kitchen, living room shared, kitchen shared, bedrooms. Like, imagine a 3 bedroom apartment. That was the situation. And I was like, oh, this is not private at all. And I had such a difficult time arriving. Just everything. I was about to have a nervous breakdown, and I was questioning like if I was even supposed to be there. And I had spent all my money getting there. So I didn't even have money for a flight home at that point. And I was waiting for the deposit from my apartment to come in to, like, you know, so I would have money for the first 1 or 2 months there. And um, when I got there, the only thing I wanted to do is jump in a bed and cry and compose myself and sit with the situation and see, like, am I gonna stay? I mean, I kind of didn't even have an option, but like, I was really thinking, like, do I like try to leave, and figure something else out? But when I got there, everyone was in the living room. I was so disoriented and jet lagged, like delusional at this point, needed sleep, couldn't sleep on the plane. For 20 hours, I could not sleep on the plane. And my daughter maybe got 1 hour of sleep. I don't know why we could not sleep on the flight. It was so uncomfortable. We were in economy and it was just like uncomfortable. And um like the last thing I wanted was to talk to anyone. The last thing I wanted was to socialize. And I walk in the place and I was like, oh, this is not going to be a good situation for us right now. Thank God I only booked it for 2 nights because, like I said, I was like booking all these different places, like staying 2 nights here, 3 nights there, blah, 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 because I just thought like I did not think how difficult it would be to lug around all these suitcases and then jump from place to place to place. I needed somewhere to ground down. It would have been good to like have a place for like a month and just like breathe, and I share this so no one else makes that mistake. If you're like me and you just need somewhere to root down, like, long term when you arrive somewhere, like, that's how I now learned my lesson. And now when I'm traveling, like when I got to Bali, I book places a month at a time because I'm like, there's no way in hell I want to move around once I arrive to a new place. um so yeah, so like I walk in the thing and I'm like, hi, and I'm confused because I don't know it's Ramadan and everyone's awake and it's like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and I'm just confused. I'm like, why is everyone awake and why is everyone in the living room? And like they lead me to um our room. So one of the ladies there, she was like, oh, hi, introduced herself and was like, it's Ramadan, so we're all awake right now, no one sleeps and we don't eat. And I was like, oh, okay, it's nice to meet you. I like couldn't speak because like my brain was not working at that point. So I was like, where's our room? And she walked us to our room and I go in the room and the first thing I notice is like there's hair all over the bed. And I have OCD. I didn't realize it until recently, but I have bad OCD. So I get super grossed out of things really easily. And like hotels gross me out. Um, Bathrooms, showers, like bathtubs, if it's like not 100% like just built and brand new, like I get so grossed out. So the first thing I notice is we go to lay on the bed and my daughter's like, there's hair all over the pillow. And I'm like, what? So I look at the bed. There's like two twin beds, two really small twin beds, one room. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a little difficult. Like, this is not what I expected. But I guess what could you expect at $30 a night? But all the other places that I paid the same amount for were much more cleaner. So yeah, I was super grossed out. I didn't even want to lay down. I couldn't lay down. That's how bad my OCD was. Then I look at the bathroom and the shower. So, like, the bathroom's like the size of the elevator, and the toilets next to the shower, they're like this far apart. And the shower, like, got on the toilet. So, like, if you turn the shower on, the water's like getting on the toilet. So, the bathroom situation was no joke. Like, that big. One little toilet and a shower next to the toilet. There was no barrier, there was no curtain, there was no nothing. And if you turned the shower on, it's basically soaking half the toilet. That's how close everything was. And then a sink. Only one person could fit in there. And if you were to go in there, you're like touching the wall and the sink. So I was like, this is interesting. This is very shocking for me. Culture shock, level 100. And I was like, what did I book? And so then I'm like, after seeing the room situation, because, after all of that, all you want to do is like lay down and compose yourself and just like sleep. But like, I was so grossed out of the hair all over. And I was like, how dirty is this place? If there's hair all over, did they even clean from the last person? And the bathroom was grossing me out. I'm like, My OCD is so bad, I literally didn't take a shower for 2 days. I had to muster up the strength within to take a shower in that bathroom because it was old and it was gross and I was super grossed out. And so that's my OCD. I don't think a normal person would have minded much. And then I remember posting a video about it, about the bathroom situation. And a lot of people were like, oh, like if you travel to certain countries, that's just how it is. So I guess that's like normal, but this wasn't very clean. So that's the part that really grossed me out. So anyways, right when we got in the room, all I wanted to do was cry. But I look at the door leading out to the living room. Doors are thin. If even if the door went all the way to the floor, like there's everyone who lives there in the living room. So they would hear me. They could hear everything. They could hear every word. I could hear every word they were talking about. And there was a gap under the door this big. Like the door didn't go all the way down. So there was no barrier. And I was like, I can't even break down crying because I'm like in a place with these strangers. Okay. And I don't feel safe breaking down and crying. So I held it in. I think I silently cried. And then um, I told my daughter, I started to like go through my suitcase and I'm like, I don't even know if I want to unpack because I don't know if I'm meant to be here. And so I told her, I'm like, I don't know if we're going to go home. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do. Let me just get myself together. And I don't even remember. It's been so long now. I don't remember if we fell asleep or not. I think eventually we just fell asleep. It was super gross. We just tried to get all the hair off the bed and eventually um we let the 2 days pass like right before I left because we stayed there for 2 nights. Right before I left, I mustered up enough strength to take a shower in the bathroom. And I was just like, oh God, just praying like that the next place is better, because we were heading to another place after that. And I sat with it and realized that I'm going to stay. And not like I had a choice, anyways, financially. Like I was there and we just flew 20 hours. So the last thing I wanted to do is fly another 20 hours back to, I would go to my mom's because at that point I let go of my apartment. I let go of my relationship. I had nowhere to go. I had no home. Um, so I was like, okay, we're here. Let's just trust that I was guided here for a reason and make it through this and see why I was guided out here. I was just waiting to see why. So then after that, after the 2 days there, I started to ground down into like being in Egypt and I was like, okay, we're gonna make it through. Like, um, and the whole time I'm waiting for my deposit from my apartment to come back, like for them to send a check. They were gonna send it to my mom's address and then she was gonna deposit it into my bank account for me. And so I was waiting on that. I had just enough money to last like a month out there and pay for accommodation, food, all of that. And we went to the next place and it was a lot better. It was like an actual hotel situation. And I think I stayed there like 3 nights. And the first thing that happened, so there was an ATM that you could walk to from the hotel and you could only pay cash at the hotel. I mistakenly only brought one debit card with me to Egypt because I didn't have a credit card. I didn't think anything would happen. I didn't think I'd have any issue with my bank. I didn't think, you know, my bank account information would get stolen, but that's exactly what happened. So the first time I went to go use the ATM, I started noticing transactions on my card and I was like, what did someone skim my card at the ATM? Like, how did this happen? And that's exactly what happened at the ATM. I guess there must have been like a skimmer on there and my card information was stolen. It's not like I had much in there anyways, but like I kept seeing people trying to take out stuff out of my account and they got away with like over $100 worth of stuff. And so I called my bank and I was like, somebody's using my card, and they're like, okay, we're gonna lock your card and we'll send you a new one. And I was like, wait, wait, I'm in a foreign country and this is the only lifeline I have to my money. This is the only card. You can't send a debit card to Egypt. You can't send anything to Egypt. I wouldn't get it. Like the mail system there is not reliable. So I was like, no, 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 stop. Like you cannot cancel my card, because she was saying it like, oh, I'm going to do it right now on the computer. I'm like, no, please. Like I don't I don't know what to do, because this is my only card I have linked to the only money I have for survival out here, like to pay for my hotel. Keep in mind, I am going to the ATM to grab money out to pay the hotel so we could continue to stay there. So if I wasn't able to get my money out, I couldn't pay the hotel. And she's like, well, we have to, because you told us somebody stole your card information, so we actually have to cancel your card. And I was like, but I'm telling you not to. She's like, it doesn't matter if you say that your card information's been stolen, we have no choice but to cancel it. And I was like, well, I'm out in a foreign country alone with my child. If you cancel my card, I'm going to be out on the sidewalk in a foreign country alone with my child. So I was like, you can't do that. And like we kind of went back and forth. She was kind of rude. And eventually I was like, well, what happens if this is after an hour of sitting on the phone with her, going back and forth, trying to get her to not cancel my card? Then she's like, okay, you have to hang up and call this number. Then I hang up and called this number, couldn't get through to them. It took another hour or something to get a hold of somebody. And finally, I think I either got back to her or somebody else. And I was like, well, what would you have to say if I told you no one stole my card information? And she was like, well, then we wouldn't have to lock your card. And I was like, okay, those transactions were mine. I was like, okay, like she knew I was lying, but I was like, what else am I supposed to do? Like I told her someone tried to use my card and that those transactions weren't mine. So I was like, okay, well, those transactions were mine. And she's like, okay, so we'll keep your card open. So basically, I had to leave my card open knowing someone had my card information and could continue to use my card. Like I said, there wasn't much on it anyways, but I needed every last dollar to live out there and pay for the hotel and pay for food and whatever. So I was like having a nightmare. And this is all, I want to bring it all back to like what I've realized now and what I realized after I was out of that situation is like these were all a lot of like money initiations that I had to go through while I was out there. Everything in Egypt, every initiation I went through was all about money. Most of it was just money. And the lesson I was going through was learning to rely on my gifts. And like I was just at that point, like right before I went to Egypt, I was just starting to do courses, and I realized like that's what I want to do. That's my purpose. I want to create courses and share codes and wisdom and things that way. But it was such a struggle with me stepping into my purpose and doing that because I didn't believe in myself. And that's when I was faced with all of my shadows in Egypt, because that was the exact initiation I needed to make me believe in myself. I had no choice but to like find it within myself to like step into my purpose and believe in myself so that I can do my course out there that I had planned to do, because I had received the download of a name of a course, and that was my plan. I was like, okay, so I have enough money to last like a month or two out there, and I also plan to work on a course out there, and that will help me bring in money and I could stay out there. And that was my plan. And right when I got there, it was nothing but initiations with money. So I was like going through a lot and starting to get like depressed out there, because I went through so much financially. The first month there, it was so hard for me. And I think I'm like ready to share. I'm ready to share now what happened, because before I think it was embarrassing for me to share like all my money struggles that I went through out there, and I hadn't yet felt comfortable enough to share so like vulnerably in that way about that situation, because it was embarrassing. But like I'm at a point now where I'm like I just want to share what I'm moving through, because I know so many of us move through this, especially when you're starting to step into your purpose, right? Like you're trying to learn how to make money off of your gifts and like make a living, earn a living off of your gifts. And that's a difficult transition to do, like, to, because you have to, your self-worth and your doubt and everything's going to be challenged. And it was like the biggest initiation of my life to learn how to believe in myself, believe in my gifts, be confident in my gifts, and show up confidently so that I could like serve the world in the way that I am meant to, by sharing my wisdom, my gifts, and my codes in the way that my soul chose to. And so that was like the biggest initiation I went through in Egypt that I wanted to share, in case anyone else is also moving through that, where it's like you're feeling the call, you're stepping into your purpose, but you haven't yet learned to believe in yourself, and so you may suffer with imposter syndrome, perfectionism, all of that stuff as you're stepping into your purpose. And if you're like starting a business where it's like you're sharing your gifts and creating like a business with that, it's it's going to highlight all of your deepest insecurities and fears and wounds and all of that. It's like such a big reflection of your how you feel about yourself. Your business is like a direct reflection of that. So it will mirror everything back to you, just like a relationship would. And it shows you like where you need to work on yourself, what wounds you're working on healing, what inner child wounds, and like, the self-doubt or the perfectionism or imposter syndrome, all of that's going to come right up. And that's what happened to me in Egypt. Is I was faced with my darkest like insecurities and deepest wounds, and it was so difficult to move through. So let me get back to what I was just talking about. Where did I end off? Oh, yeah, with my card, right? So eventually I settled my card, I kept it open. And so I was waiting and waiting and waiting for this security deposit to come. They had 30 days to send it. And I was like, oh, they'll probably send it in like a week. That's what I planned. It's like they'll send it in a week, probably two max, because any other time I've gotten a deposit back from an apartment, it comes instantly, like the week I move out, or like 2 weeks max. So I was like depending on that money. And it took 30 days. They waited till, I swear, the office lady like was not nice to me, and I swear she waited on purpose to send that deposit back, because on the very last day is the date on the letter when I finally got the deposit back, and my mom sent me a picture of it. It was the last day of the 30 days. So I was like, okay, like wait as long as possible, I guess, and then send it to me. I was depending on that money. So I ended up running out of money. I had to borrow money from my mom, and it was like bad. And I was like falling into a deep depression. And I was like, so the first month in Egypt, I was actually stuck in Cairo, and um, I didn't have money to leave. So this, over the span of like a month, I ended up staying at this hotel for like a month, just sitting and waiting for this deposit to come through so that I could go to Luxor, because that's where I was being called to go next, because that's where all the temples are. And actually, the only thing in Cairo is the pyramids. So, I mean, a month in Cairo is unnecessary. You don't need a month in Cairo unless you're like constantly going to the pyramids. And at that point, I didn't even have money to go to the pyramids. I was literally had just enough money to be at my hotel and afford food. And I was like, this is not what I planned. Like, this is not what I planned. I thought I would go there, and I was like, oh, I'm being called to Egypt. The goddesses are calling me, and I'm going to be, I'm going to be so activated by the land. This course is just going to flow out of me, and I'm going to be able to make money from that, and everything's going to be perfect. And like the exact opposite happened, because, if it wasn't for all of that, I wouldn't have learned, and I wouldn't even be who I am right now. I wouldn't even be doing this podcast. I wouldn't be having the confidence in myself and in my gifts if I didn't go through those initiations. So I'm so grateful for them. But when I was in the middle of it, I wanted to die. Like I was so depressed. Um, and usually I struggle with depression a lot, and I'm used to it. Like I don't even remember the last, like since my awakening, I've been depressed on and off. So it's nothing new to me. But like when it comes to money issues and survival, that's when I start getting really, really depressed. And so, of course, that was highlighted in Egypt. And um, I was like, what the heck is going on? So I was too depressed to work on anything. I was too depressed to work on anything, and I did not feel good. I was not doing good mentally. So I was just like waiting and waiting and waiting for this check. The check was like my lifeline, and I was like waiting for it to come through so I can go to Luxor and start this new chapter, because I was like, I've been in Cairo long enough, like, and I didn't even have money to go to the pyramids. Like I literally I plan to do a tour with my friend. So she does tours out there in Egypt. And I told her, I was like, she's like, oh, when do you want to go see the pyramids? I'm like, opened up to her. I was like, I can't even afford to pay for a tour right now, to be honest, because my security deposit that I was waiting on hasn't arrived. And I ran out of money, and I'm like borrowing money from my mom right now until this check gets here. So she was like, she's like, you can pay me back. She's like, you need to see the pyramids. Like, you guys have to. You've been here. Like, I forget exactly how long at that point. I think it was like 2 weeks in or like 3 weeks. I really don't remember how long it was at that point. But she was like, it's not a big deal. Like, pay me back. And I was like, oh my God, like I could finally do something, because arriving in Egypt and not being able to go anywhere and do anything, and like I'm like staring at the pyramids from my balcony, but like can't go to them, and I couldn't do anything. And I was just like, feeling so depressed. So when she said that, I was like feeling so happy. I was like, "Oh my God, like thank you. Like I'll pay you back as soon as I get my check." And we went on the tour with her and her boyfriend, and it was so incredible, incredibly activating for me. And it was it was also intense. Like we went to the pyramids, we rode camels, and we went inside one of the pyramids, which I think is the center one. And I took my daughter, and I didn't know she was claustrophobic until we were halfway through there and we couldn't go out. It was like one way. So once you're in, you got to go. And my daughter really struggled with being inside there. It's really hot too. And she was like 7 at the time. She started getting claustrophobic. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was like something she had, being dealing with being claustrophobic. So she started crying, and I was like, I was trying to, it was so hard for me, to be honest, going to any temple or pyramid, being alone with my daughter, because I had to deal with her, and rather than soaking in completely the magic of it, I was like dealing with whining and complaining, and all the things that a kid ha- has to deal with. Like, she, in her perspective, she's like, my mom's dragging me around to these like places. Like, to a kid, they don't know what this is, they don't know the magic of Egypt. They're just, she's like, why is she taking me to the sand and it's hot and I'm claustrophobic? Like, so she's just complaining the whole time, most places, because she's hot and wants to leave. So it was a bit difficult for me to be there and not completely able to like soak in the magic of the place. But I still, regardless, received what I was meant to receive. But yeah, that was what happened when we went in the pyramids. And so I didn't really get to, I received what I needed to, but I didn't really get to stay long because we had to rush out of there because my daughter was having a difficult time and was crying. And so we had to get out of there fast. But it was just such a magical experience, regardless. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Just seeing the pyramids, like, this is something I've dreamed of seeing in person for so many years, and seeing it up close and feeling like the energy. Oh, it brought me to tears. It brought me to tears the first time we walked up and I looked at the pyramids. I just like started crying. I couldn't believe how incredible. I can't even explain the energy emanating from, you have to see it for yourself. Like, there's no way I could describe it. You have to go for yourself. If you feel the call to go to Egypt, go, because it's incredible. It's so incredible. And yeah, after that, back to the initiations of what I went through there. Once we did that, once we got to visit the pyramids, I was like, okay, there's nothing else left for me in Cairo. It's time to go to Luxor, because that's where all the temples are. So I was like feeling called to go visit all the temples. And I just had to wait. I had to wait like 2 more weeks after that to for the check to arrive so I could have enough to book the Airbnb in Luxor for a month and to pay for our plane tickets from Cairo to Luxor. And so eventually the check finally came, and but at the same time, once the check was deposited into my account, I had a fucking panic attack because I was like, any moment this money could be taken out of my account. Because remember, my card information was stolen and I couldn't cancel my card. So I had to leave it open. So I had figured out how to lock my debit card every time I used it, and I eventually realized that's what I had to do. Once the money was in my account, I was like, okay, I could lock it. But then I got scared. I'm like, what if I unlock it to book these flights, or I unlock it for the ATM, or I unlock it for like one transaction and that's when they take like $500 out? So I was like going through so many initiations with money. It was like not even funny. And when I had to unlock my card to book our flights to Luxor, I was so scared and like literally having panic attacks over it because I was like, they could take my money out. So I had to sit and see like what would the best situation be for me right now. Like, um, I was like, I need to book an Airbnb in Luxor for a month. So no matter what happens, I have a place to stay for the next month. And then I could spend a big chunk of money that I know can't be stolen out of my account. So that made me feel safer. I was like, I'll book it for a month. I'll pay um, like for the whole month up front. So I know I'm taken care of for the next month. And maybe I could work on my course when I get to Luxor. And yeah, so I booked the flights. We booked the Airbnb. It was this beautiful little Airbnb in Luxor. We were so divinely guided to go there because when we got there, like it was the perfect situation for us. All of the temples were in Luxor. So I got to visit the Luxor temple. I got to visit Dendera, which is not in Luxor, it's in Dendera. I think that's the name of the city. And then I got to visit Abydos. I got to visit all the temples out there, not all at once. Because I remember I stayed in Luxor for a month, and then I moved to Madi, which is a little neighborhood in Cairo, and we actually signed a lease for an apartment for the summer. So I'm trying to figure out a way to fit 5 months into a 1 to 2 hour podcast, but where I left off at was when we were in Luxor for a month, where I went and saw the most temples while we were out there. And I had a really incredible experience in Dendera that I want to share, and that is the Hathor Temple. So it was about an hour drive. I didn't realize this before arriving to Egypt, but every single temple is like a whole journey in itself. So I wasn't able to see everything I wanted to see because first of all, I traveled solo. I didn't go on a tour. I didn't go on a group trip. I went to every temple by myself, and just having the lady who I stayed with the Airbnb, her husband would drive us there and drop us off at the front where we would buy tickets and we'd go in by ourselves. And you don't really see a lot of people doing that by themselves because a lot of people get like harassed to buy like a tour guide or whatever. So a lot of people are traveling in groups and they're there on a retreat or in like a group tour. I actually prefer, personally for me, going alone because I get to do my own thing. I'm not around anyone else. I can stay as long as I want, where I want, like certain part of the temple. And I like being alone. And I have social anxiety anyway, so I don't like traveling in big groups, but I preferred it that way. And I loved being able to visit the temples by ourselves. So I just wanted to share with the Dendera temple was the most powerful experience that I had because I don't know, it felt like home. Like I felt like I had lived in that temple before as a priestess, and it was the most powerful temple that I felt connected to. And also the temple of Philae, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, the Isis temple. So when I arrived to Dendera, I literally the first room, the first chamber I walked into, because you walk in through the door and then there's like these chambers. There's these incredible pillars. The I can't even explain how incredible it is. You have to see it for yourself. The whole ceiling is just carved out with these hieroglyphics. I don't know why my brain can't figure out if it's hieroglyphs or hieroglyphics right now. But everything's so detailed and incredible. From ceiling to floor, like carvings of these hieroglyphs. And it was just so, like, the energy of that place. There's like a huge, like, wasp thing, so I'm just watching so it doesn't fly over by me. So when I went into the first room, there's these chambers in the first room before you go to the back of the temple, and I could not control myself. I started like uncontrollably crying, like uncontrollably, like I couldn't stop. And one of the guards comes up to me and he's like, "You can't do that here." And he was super nice. He's like, "You can't do that here, shush." Like, and he took me up to this room where I had a chance to be alone, and like he's like, "You can pray to Hathor here." And I remember talking about this on a video, and I was like, I don't know, sometimes they do that, right? Sometimes the guides will come up to you and they'll want a tip for taking you somewhere, and I'm not sure, because this one particular guide, he took me into this like specific place behind Dendera temple complex where there's like a room dedicated to Isis. And yeah, you tip them, but I'm not sure if he just wanted a tip or if it was like a special experience where he was like, "You can go pray to Hathor," regardless of his intentions. My experience was very sacred, so that was my first experience going there, and I was like, oh my god, like I couldn't hold it in. I was like, this is home. This is home. And yeah, he took me up to this room where I like got a chance to be alone and cry and connect with Hathor. And then I got to explore the rest of the temple complex. Yeah, I had some pretty incredible experiences there, and I felt so connected to that temple more than any other temple. I've also had some pretty incredible synchronicities with the Temple of Isis, Temple of Philae, and I have to share that. It was so crazy. So I was reading the book Initiation a long time ago by Elizabeth Hawke, I think is how you pronounce it. Excuse me for the noise. There's like a villa next door with a pool, and I think they're having like a pool party or something. It's really loud. Hopefully it won't interrupt the video. But so I had bought this book that I felt called to for a while, and it's called Initiation. And as I was reading it, I had a vision of myself as a priestess, like walking on this temple floor. And this temple was different from any other temple I've seen because it overlooked the Nile River. And intuitively, like in this vision, I was like, that's the Nile River. It overlooked a body of water, and I was like, that's the Nile. And I felt like I was wearing like priestess attire, priestess dress, and I just saw myself walking like as a priestess in this temple. And I was like, this temple overlooks the Nile, and I didn't really know like if it was a real temple or if it was like a vision, like because a lot of the temples in Egypt, they've actually been moved. So right now the Temple of Philae is actually relocated, so it's not in the exact place that it was originally, which is interesting. Because before I even ever heard of that temple, I had a vision of myself at this temple, but it looked different because it was the original. I was having a vision of the original placement of the temple. And so when I remember after I had that vision, I looked up and I Googled like Egyptian temples near the Nile River, and that's the temple that came up, and I was like, that's the temple, but it looked different. And then I found out that they actually relocated the temple, so it all made sense. So I had like an incredible synchronicity with that temple, and then with Dendera. And when I saw the Temple of Philae for the first time, it was also pretty incredible, but nothing at that time when I was there was as powerful as Dendera. And if you visit and you go when you see like the incredible carvings on the wall and all the hieroglyphics, it's so incredible. I couldn't recommend that temple enough, especially if you're, feeling like you spent past lives as a priestess in Egypt. I think that temple will feel like home to you, because I remember reading that we used to like be in the temple so much, and that many of us lived there. And I think that was one of the temples that we lived in, because I swear it felt like home and I never wanted to leave. It felt so special. And I was like, I literally told my daughter, I was like, I feel like I could move in. Sorry, it's getting kind of loud. So definitely visit that temple if you feel the call. The ones that I visited in Luxor that were my favorite were Luxor Temple, Karnak Temple. I think that's the name of the other one. Temple of Philae is actually in Aswan. I don't know how to pronounce it. So like I said, all the temples are really spread out. Like sometimes you have to drive 1 to 2 hours to get from Luxor to certain temples like Abydos and Dendera. Abydos was another one that's really incredible. And that's the temple with the flower of life, like laser etched onto the wall. So it's pretty incredible. And yeah, as far as like, a lot of people ask me like, what was your experience like in Egypt with the temples and the activations? And I think you have to go for yourself and feel it. I can share my experience, but it's really hard to put into words, and you have to experience it for yourself. But those are the parts of my experience visiting the temples that I wanted to share. But I think mostly what I want to share of my time in Egypt all has to do with the initiations that I went through there, because I feel like that's going to help a lot of people who are moving through similar initiations with stepping into their purpose and everything like that. So I'm going to get back to that story, but I did want to take a moment to share about my experience visiting the temples out there. And yeah, it's just incredible if you ever get a chance to visit them, whether it's in a group or alone. Like you could always, even if you're in a group, I'm sure they give you time to go off and sit with the stones and meditate. You have to be careful though also, because a lot of the temples, they don't let you meditate there. So yeah, but I loved going alone, to be honest. I don't know if I would ever want to go in a group, although I think it'd be, if it was like a retreat, like something like that, it could be very powerful and beautiful as well if you're going with people who are connected to those temples in the same way that you are. If it was like a priestess retreat, I'm sure that could be really, really powerful and potent. So hopefully in the future I get to do something like that. But because I don't have anyone to watch my daughter and I was out there alone, I didn't really get to be a part of anything like that, like a retreat experience. But possibly in the future I would love to do that. But at this point in my life, I can't go to things like that. I have nobody to watch my daughter, and I have her with me like 24/7. No family to watch her and no babysitter situation. So for now, I just like travel and she's with me, and I go by myself instead of like in a retreat experience. But yeah, anyways, I want to get back to when we were in Luxor. So we stayed in Cairo for a month, then we went to Luxor and we stayed there a month. And then I had a conversation with my friend, and she's like, when are you gonna get an apartment here? And I kept telling her like, I don't know how long I'm gonna be here for. And she was like laughing and saying like, okay, like I'm pretty sure it's clear like you have moved here now, so it's probably time to look for a long-term place. And I kept like not really wanting to, because I was going through some things with my daughter's father. He did not want us out there, which I have no clue, because it's like not his choice, because my daughter lives with me and I raise her full time by myself. Even when we had an apartment together, it's like a long story that I will record that story in another podcast, and it might make the situation more clear. But I raised her all by myself, and I always have. And so I was going through a situation with my like ex who's very toxic, and he did not want us out there, and he would use like child support and threaten child support against me, like if I didn't bring her back. And so I was also going through that with him. And so every time I was thinking like, oh, you know, as much as I would love to live here for a year or two, like I'm being threatened every single time I talk to him to like come back and bring her back to America. So it was like a difficult situation. So that's why I didn't want to get a for sure long-term place. But she was like, you should look for a place just for a few months, like so you don't have to jump all around. And I was like, you know what, like that actually sounds like exactly what I need. So she was recommending a little neighborhood called Madi, which is incredible. She's like, it's a neighborhood, so many expats live there, and I think you and your daughter would really love it there. And I was like, okay. So I forget, she connected me with somebody who connected me with a realtor, and the guy ended up saying that he could lease an apartment to me for 2 months for the summer. And so I signed a lease. It was so cool. I was like, oh my God, I'm like signing a lease in Egypt. Like, even though it was only for the summer for 2 or 3 months, it was such a cool experience. And that's when I started to actually feel like I was living there, because the first 2 months I was like, oh, I'm still just traveling, even though like, I mean, I'm living where I'm traveling because like I don't have a home to go back to. So wherever I'm traveling to is where I'm like living. But to like actually get an apartment out there and sign a lease was like a pretty cool experience. But there were so many initiations with that as well, because I didn't know how long I could stay out there for. And yeah, there was a bunch of other things, like personal reasons, like I said, with my daughter's father and everything, of why we didn't really plan to stay out there for more than 6 months to a year. I thought I could last out there a year, but I wasn't meant to stay that long. It was only 5 months till I got called to go to Costa Rica. So when we got to our apartment, I was like, okay, this is it. Like, even though I was still moving through really, really hard depression, and I want to share that, when I was in Luxor, I remember sitting and trying to record my first video for my course. And I recorded it, and at that time, this was my second course. So I was still like brand new to doing courses, and brand new to like stepping into my purpose in that way and showing up in that way. And so when I struggled so much with imposter syndrome, and when I sat down to record my first video, it was so difficult because I would play the video back, and the first time I rewatched the video, I started crying, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm so cringe. Like, I suck. I sound like I just judged myself so much doubt, so much insecurities came up, and I was just like, I can't do this. And I gave up on myself for a second. And I was like, I can't do this. I quit. I'm not even going to do the course, because like, yeah, I may have received the name for it and felt guided to like make a course while I'm in Egypt, but like, fuck this. I can't do this. I couldn't even watch the replays of my own video, and I was so depressed. I really couldn't, like get what I wanted to get out and speak about what I wanted to speak about, because I was going through such a dark time at that point, that I wasn't feeling like my best self. I wasn't feeling connected as much as I would have if I wasn't like feeling super depressed. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't make a course while I'm depressed. There's just no way. I can't do it. And I'm not going to force myself to. And I remember it hit me that night, like after I like quit temporarily on my whole plan. I had that plan and that desire and that call to do the course while I was out there. But 2 months had already passed, and I couldn't do it. And I wasn't feeling like it was possible for me. And I started questioning everything, and I was like, I don't even know if I'm meant to do this. I don't even know if I'm meant to do courses. I don't even know if I'm good enough. And just like every single insecurity, every single like wound just surfaced and hit me right in the face. I was so depressed that I remember writing a letter to God, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I really wanted to die. Like, there's times where I get so depressed where I literally want to die, but I know that I can't. And but it just like you feel like you want to, and I wanted to like cease to exist because I was like, the struggles with money sometimes get so hard that I'm like, when it comes to me having enough money for a place to live and like food, I feel so like trapped, like survival mode. Like that's a huge initiation I've been moving through for years. And it's been so many years that I sometimes I get fed up and I'm like, am I ever gonna figure it out? Am I ever gonna figure this out? But of course, it makes sense that I had to move through that initiation because it's just something I think all of us have to go through when we're like moving away from like certain ways of making money. Like, say you have a normal 9 to 5 job and you feel called to start your own business and start selling crystal jewelry or something, and that you feel like that's your calling at that point in your life, and you quit. And there's like this point where you go through these certain initiations and you have to figure out like, do you believe in yourself and your business enough to know that you can make a living from it? Like, are you going to go full in on it? Are you going to go full in on yourself? And it's tough when you first begin stepping into your purpose when it's associated with money and you're like trying to learn to make a living from your gifts alone, and it's not an easy initiation. So this is why I share, this is what I went through when I first started doing courses. And yeah, it was completely new to me, and I went through so many dark times where I was like, I can't do this, I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna give up. And I kept being called back to it. So that's how I knew like it was my purpose and I was meant to do it, because I persevered and I worked through the wounds as they surfaced. I worked through the shadows. I did the inner child healing, and I confronted like those parts of me that didn't feel worthy and didn't believe in herself, and walked through the fire of that initiation. And that's when I mean, for me, that's literally like, you have to move through those initiations in order to begin believing in yourself. Like, had I not gone through those initiations, I wouldn't believe in myself. I wouldn't have believed in myself enough to start a podcast. I wouldn't have believed in myself to keep going and keep making courses. Like, but it's like I wasn't meant to give up on myself. And if you're moving through similar initiations and you're going through the same thing, it's like you still know inside, even when you doubt so much, like there's still this pull, right? Because it's our calling and it's part of our purpose and destiny. And if it's part of your purpose and destiny, you're always going to keep being called back to it. You won't be able to go too far off the path of your destiny. So I kept persevering, and even though things got really dark all throughout my times in Egypt, I kept feeling like the goddesses supporting me and pushing me to keep going. And so that's what I did. And when I got that 2-bedroom apartment, I was like, this is the perfect place because I have a bedroom like my daughter can go in while I go record my videos for my course and everything. Because like that's very important for me to be able to like record videos and create like the content for my courses and everything. I need to be able to have a private space in order to do that. So I gave myself a month, and I was like, okay, I have this place for 2 months so far. I was thinking of extending it a month, but I was like, for now, I have this place for 2 months, and I'm going to give myself 1 month to overcome this depression and snap the fuck out of it and get to work for what I knew I was meant to do there. Because literally, before I even arrived to Egypt, I was like, I know I'm supposed to create a course out here, and I didn't know what it was going to be about, but I knew it was going to be powerful. And surprise, surprise, it ended up being about all the initiations I was moving through, and I had no clue it was going to be that. I had like this whole other idea, but like, of course, it ended up being the initiations I was moving through currently. So that was like a really powerful course. It was called the Priestess Path, and it was so powerful because everything I was moving through or had just moved through was what I felt called to share. And I think that it's so powerful to be able to share like the lessons that you learn through the hardships. But for me, since I was still like new to creating courses and stuff, I like doubted myself in how I was supposed to show up for that course, because I was like, can I teach on things that I'm currently moving through? Like, and it ended up being so powerful, and everyone that felt called to join it was they're like, this is the exact thing I'm moving through, and this is so helpful. Like, this really helps me to hear that you're also going through it. But while I was recording those videos, I would doubt myself and be like, is it okay to show up in this way and admit and be so authentic and vulnerable and be like, I wasn't able to record this course for 2 months because I doubted myself, but yet here I am showing up and, sharing what I learned through overcoming that initiation. And it ended up being so powerful. And that was like my first course where I really started to gain confidence in my gifts and in the way I share the codes that I feel called to share. And I was initiated so much by that land, and that's really where I began working with Goddess Isis and Mary Magdalene the most. So there was a lot that happened in Egypt. And when I got back from Egypt, I was not the same person. Like, that land initiated me so much. Working with the goddesses initiated me so much that I was like, I fully stepped into my purpose while I was living in Egypt. And it was such a big part of why I am able to keep going today, and like why I can confidently show up and move forward with my purpose and keep believing in myself and creating courses, is because of the initiations I went through in Egypt. So that's why I share what I went through, because I think we all doubt ourselves sometimes, and we all have those inner critic voices that make us question, like, are we good enough? Is it okay to show up in this way? Is the wisdom that we have, like, is it good enough? Can we share it? Are our gifts good enough? We all move through that. And if you're going through a difficult initiation right now with that, it's so divine, because it's those exact initiations that shape us into the version of ourselves that we're destined to be. And it's how we gain confidence. And if you don't move through those moments where it's so hard, or like you feel cringe, or you feel like an imposter, you have to walk through that fire. You have to move through that initiation in order to begin believing in yourself. And that's how you gain the confidence to continue on your path of your purpose, is you just believe in yourself so much, even when there's doubt. Like, there's still that pull for you to keep going, and you just keep showing up. You keep showing up as you are and keep going. And like, as you move through each challenge and initiation, it gets easier. And that's how you do it. That's how you step into your purpose. You keep going and it gets easier, and you start before you're ready. You start when you don't feel ready, and you're never going to feel ready, But if you feel the call, just start. You got to start somewhere. Everyone has to start somewhere, and everyone has to move through those phases where you feel super cringe and super like an imposter. And I think it gets easier with time, but I still go through those initiations. It just gets a little bit easier. So if I never started a few years ago, I wouldn't have been where I am now, which I'm very happy that I finally feel like confident enough to like fully show up and like trust in my gifts and believe in my offerings, to where when I share them with the world, I fully believe in them. And that was really difficult for me the first few years of doing that, of stepping into my purpose and doing courses and starting my business with that. So yeah, Egypt played a huge part in my journey of stepping into my purpose, which is why I was so excited to share this episode, because I feel like there's so many codes in what I shared, like if you're also moving through that. And I think it's really important. So like, so many people when I got back from Egypt were like, I cannot wait to hear about your podcast of your experience in Egypt. And I was thinking, like, my experience in Egypt was so difficult and it was such a shit show, but like, looking back, it was the most powerful time of my life. And so before, I would think like, before even getting to Egypt, I would think, oh, if I were to make a podcast about Egypt, it'd be about all the activations of the land and the temples. But really, it was the initiations I went through. And I know now, looking back, that's why I was called to go out there. I experienced the biggest initiation of my life around money, around purpose, and all of that. And that's why I was called out there. And yeah, it was just so powerful. So the course that I created out there is called the Priestess Path, and there are just so many codes in that course, because the whole time I was moving through these initiations, like, the goddesses were there guiding me, and I received so many downloads and information that was shared in that course that was like so potent. And yeah, that land changed me forever, and I can't wait to go back. It's already calling again, but I don't know when. I don't know when I'm meant to go out there. And yeah, right now I'm in Bali. I've been here for 4 months. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. It was the same situation with Egypt, where it's like I get called to go out there, and I don't know if I'm moving there or traveling. Ends up now I'm like living here temporarily, and I don't know how long for. And I'm like, Egypt's calling, but I don't know when I'm meant to go there. And that's just the life, right? You just take it day by day and like trust where we're being guided. And so many of us are called to like move to and live in and travel to different portals, and there's always something there for us. And I will definitely be making an episode about Bali soon. But after almost a year of not finishing the final part of the first part of my podcast, I was like, okay, it's time. I have to sit down and like finish this. And yeah, I'm so excited to share this story. So thank you for being here and tuning in, and I can't wait to record the next episode and share more of what's happened since then, because it's been 2 years and I have so much to share. And that's why I'm so grateful for this podcast, because it's a space I can show up in such a like authentic and vulnerable way and just share like everything I feel called to share. And I think that's so beautiful that we have the chance to do that through social media or through podcasts or through videos on YouTube, like whatever way you feel called to share. I think it's such a blessing that we have these platforms where we could do that, and like it's so beautiful. I'm so grateful. So I will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.